Aloha and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Got Your Six podcast. This six-question podcast brings together high performers to share their methods, strategies, and ideas, delivered in an informative and, most importantly, actionable way that'll help you lead yourself and those around you from the battlefield to the boardroom. Coming to you every episode, I'm your host, Tony Nash. And into the breach.
Nothing mentioned on this podcast is an endorsement or opinion of the Department of Defense.
I got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. I got your six.
Sixers, what an unbelievable treat today. I am joined by one of my favorite agents of change that I've been able to interact with in my entire life. Intel officer by trade, innovator by passion, Lauren Hansen-Armendariz. Thank you for being on the Got Your Six podcast today.
Tony, thank you so much for thinking of me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So what you do is really unique, and we both hope it continues to grow and flourish, is that you're an innovation officer within inside the Army, which some people might be listening that have been in the Army or are currently in the Army or been in any other service, and they're like, innovation in the military, right? Isn't that usually a top-down organization? And that's what you're helping to not like kind of course correct, right? Is looking at opportunities to get things to the front as quickly as possible to implement real change for whatever warfighter you're interacting with. Is that right?
Right. I mean, really, innovation has to happen at every echelon. But what we've found is tactical level units typically don't have the resources to provide the right bottom-up feedback. And so, when it comes to more complex challenges that we have, the solutions need to be more comprehensive in evidence. And so that's part of what we're doing is making the resources organic to help tactical level organizations understand how they can help solve some of their own problems with some of their own resources, but also tying in with other organizations like from the capability development community. And so there's the institutional Army is doing a lot of really great things when it comes to transformation, and they're focused at the strategic priorities, which is exactly what we need for them to be doing at that level. But then the challenge is we're missing a lot of opportunities when it comes to soldier talent. There are some incredibly talented soldiers. When at Eagle Works, our innovation program at the 101st, we get soldiers walking in with coding experience, with wanting to work on hands-on robotics or designing with 3D printing, and they just don't have the resources to be able to do anything about it. And so that's kind of where we try to bridge that gap.
Now, in order to identify the gap, right, innovation had to, be first and foremost in your mind at some point in your career. Can you tell us a little bit about when that happened or when it kind of the light bulb went off, more or less?
Sure. So I was actually at JRTC when I found out I was nominated for the position as the innovation officer. Like you mentioned, I'm Intel. So when I first heard about it, I was like, innovation, everybody has a general idea of what innovation is. But when you look at it from how do you empower innovation at an institutional level, that's a whole different story, right? If we, if I had $1 for every time I saw the word innovation in our doctrine or in a speech, like we need to be more innovative, I would be totally rich. I could retire. But when it comes down to what does that actually mean? How do we make that actionable? That's where it becomes really challenging. And so when I became the Deputy Division Innovation Officer, the first 4 months was just figuring out what is innovation, what does it mean, and what does it mean to empower innovation? There's so much that goes into it between the education and the resources, the time, the psychological safety, understanding the right tools and methodologies, because a lot of what innovation is what innovation requires is experimentation and learning. And part of that requires risk. And we're really, for the military, we accept a lot of risk in the battlefield. But, in garrison, it seems like we're not as willing to take risks when we can't guarantee the success of trying something new. So, say a soldier has an idea, we immediately gravitate towards all of the constraints. So, for example, like when we first started developing our vision for what our innovation center would look like, the first reaction was always, well, where are you going to get all those resources? How are soldiers going to have time for that? Everybody just starts immediately thinking about what all the constraints are, instead of thinking about what's possible. The art of the possible is just kind of a lost art for the military sometimes. And what we did by just focusing on, what are the current obstacles that soldiers have to being able to innovate and experiment and learn and try new things. That's really where we started with and how we were able to design the program overall. And so it was definitely not a clear path and understanding what any of that was. It was a lot of talking to strangers, talking to soldiers, talking to other innovation officers, and just trying to figure out, what are soldiers' current obstacles and what can we do to help give them the resources, the education, the framework, the physical and the psychological space to be able to experiment.
It really comes back down to trust, right? With the innovator themselves and then the resources and opportunities that you provide over at EagleWorks. What I loved what you said about innovation is like there is no clear path. And I think innovation, correct me if I'm wrong, only works and is like a smooth path when you look backwards. Like you're able to kind of look straight and you miss all the failures, all the half steps where you're like, I don't know if this was the right way to go, but we figured it out at the end of the day, because it is about learning through failure and success.
Exactly. And that's why in the main entrance, like one of the things we want to do is put like lines of prototypes to show, because everybody just sees the end result, right? Everybody just sees the success. They don't see like the 70 failures, all the different prototypes. And, that applies too for non-material solutions too. All of the feedback that's required. If you want to get it right, it needs to be iterative. And we don't do that. I mean, think about how we typically go to commanders for a proposal, right? Like, you imagine, you spend forever on this PowerPoint, like you have to get everything right. Everything has to be perfect. You have to be 100% sure it's not going to fail. But that goes against all, innovation principles. You have to iterate. You have to keep getting feedback and trying new things. And it's just not institutionalized. And that's something that we're trying to fix, is giving, coaching soldiers in that, because it's not easy. So when soldiers come to EagleWorks, they're like, you just see like their eyes light up, because sometimes they're just so exhausted because they have all this talent and they want to use it, like they want to make a difference. And they're just like, they're constrained by what's typically done and kind of the status quo. And we just, that's like the most fun part of the job, is giving them that space and seeing that light in their eyes. So, I said earlier, like sometimes when I think I'm just absolutely about to go crazy because I'm trying to tear down these obstacles for soldiers and I'm just like tired and exhausted. And then like a soldier will come in and be like, in this workshop, I made more friends in 2 days than I did in 6 months. Like I learned so much. I want to take this back to my soldiers. And I'm like, this is why I'm exhausting myself. This is why we're doing what we're doing, is so soldiers have these opportunities and can, use their talents to make a difference.
And leveraging the ability to be vulnerable around strangers when you walk in there allows you to trust so much more. I'm just such a massive fan, because that iteration, like it's not going to be the first attempt. The overnight success, like you said, is, 20 months ago. But what it looks like today is people are just giving the old thumbs up and be like, I'm glad we did this. I'm like, thanks.
Right.
Thanks. So where are you currently challenging yourself when it comes to innovation? Because there's always work to be done.
Yeah, there is. So one thing I'm really trying to be more deliberate about is protecting time for creativity. And that's like one for me personally, because it's really easy for me to want to do all of the things. But creativity is a muscle, and everyone has it, but it just gets smaller when you don't use it. And so when we're it's really easy to feel like we constantly have to be doing something productive. When I have just like a moment of spare time, I'm like, okay, I need to get so much stuff done. Sometimes we think that we have to do more tasks related to our job in order to be better at our job. But the opposite can be true. When I realize when I do something different that's unrelated to my job, it can spur new ideas, or I can see something through a new lens, or just taking a step back and seeing it from a different perspective. It's easy when we're, especially at a tactical level unit, to get wrapped up in like this cycle of just doing things and producing. But it's so important to like take a step back and try something new. Just even if it's just like daydreaming or imagining, like doing something different just for the sake of being creative can really help, because creativity helps us see what's possible. And again, like I really think that's an art that sometimes we lose in the military, the art of the possible, because we constrain ourselves to what's possible, or to what's currently available, what we think is most probable to succeed, and not what could be possible. So just, like I said, for the example, when we first started, everybody gravitated towards like the constraints. But what the creativity was having the vision of like what could be possible without those constraints. So I'm really trying to set aside time just to be creative, even if it's not related to the job, because you never know what can come from that. Sometimes the best ideas come from when I'm not doing any work at all.
And it shows how you continue to lead with intention, right? Because you're so mindful of protecting that time, however long it may be, right? A couple minutes, an hour. And that white space that we always constantly look at in the military is like white space, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to do less better, as opposed to just doing more to do more.
Less is more.
Because, absolutely. And then you look at other organizations that have done innovation, Bell Labs. It wasn't anywhere near any of the other, all of the innovation labs are usually like thousands of miles away from the corporate office or the headquarters. You're literally inside of it, right? So that presents its own challenges. Having been on this journey for a little bit now, what belief or behavior, or is it habit? Is it that protecting that white space that has greatly improved your life and taking this thing from a vision to an actual implementation, or is there something else that you would attribute it to?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Being able to leverage diverse perspectives, creativity. I think one of the things that's helped me the most is optimism. To do something like this, you have to be an optimist. You have to be able to really cut through all of the limitations and obstacles, and to be able to see, like, to have that vision and stay focused on that. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Like finding that big why and staying true to that. It really does require optimism, because the innovation space is exhausting. It's all about, creativity and cutting down barriers and bureaucracy. And let's face it, the military is one of the most bureaucratic institutions in the world, right? We're a huge organization. And so it's really hard to transform big organizations. And so, while optimism doesn't seem like, it's not typically a trait that we talk about as being something necessary for success in the military. When it comes to innovation, again, like being able to constantly get through no's to find the yeses, and to keep striving for the possible, even when a lot of people don't see what you're doing or don't understand it. It's tough work. I remember when we first started, I was starting to listen to some of the AFWorks podcasts from the Air Force, and some of their innovation officers. And I found it so helpful to hear other innovation officers talk about how exhausting it is, just because it is exhausting. And that's why I think optimism is so important.
Right. And there's two things I want to touch on. I'm going to do my best to kind of make them brief because I want to keep going on this.
Yeah.
One, when you're innovating, you need to find community, right? And it doesn't need to be people that you see all the time. The internet's a wonderful place where you can interact and find those people. It just takes some time. But you also talked about optimism, which I think is an absolutely necessary trait, not only serving others, but serving yourself, in the sense of like continue to work forward. What's the mantra that you go to when it's like, I know you said like when soldiers show up, that's like a physical representation, but is there something you say in your head where you're like, all right, hey, this, and then it's just like, all right, you're ready to go?
Yeah, for me, it's transformation starts with soldiers. It really does. I mean, it starts
I love
with
that.
people, and soldiers are the ones who are the closest to the problems. They're the ones who are the executors. It always, at the end of the day, it always comes down, it comes down to soldiers. And so, and that's the most meaningful part of the job for me too, is being able to help soldiers get what they need to be able to make their lives better, to be able to make their units better. So really, the way I see my job and my role is just, how can I help soldiers? How can we as an organization help soldiers get what they need to be able to innovate and transform? Because, top-down transformation efforts are critical for keeping everything organized and prioritized. Transformation doesn't materialize until it's embraced by the people. And so that's kind of what I always go back to.
Yeah, like as you look at like bell curves, right? Like you are the earliest adopter, and it's getting everyone else to kind of come with you to keep that thing going up and up and up and up and up. As we talked, central to innovation is failure, right? It's necessary in order to create innovation. You can't go around it. You can't try to go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go through it. I mean, you can only go through it. Where, either along this way or in your life, has failure presented itself so gloriously where it was just absolutely spectacular, but it led to just an absolute massive win for you?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I could talk all day about failures and what we've learned. One of my favorite quotes is, "You can't guarantee success, but you can guarantee learning." And that's from the book We the Possibility by Mitchell Weiss. Yeah, and so lots of examples, and that's something that we use at EagleWorks too, is like, we can't guarantee that this project's going to be successful, but we can learn from it. But I think personally, one of my biggest failures that ended up being a success, and I guess in the long run, is when I was a lieutenant, like I just utterly failed to try new things when I was a second lieutenant. So my first 2 years I spent as a special security officer, which is not really an intel role. And it's just at the time I hadn't built the skills yet to understand how to communicate my skills, my strengths and aptitudes. So I just spent a really long time in a position that didn't best fit my strengths. And it was just highly administrative. It's like it's like a creative person's worst nightmare. And so I spent the first couple of years just thinking I was terrible at the Army. And then, I didn't want anyone to realize that I wasn't great at this job. So I didn't really talk to anyone I didn't need to. I didn't try new things. And I really, really regret that. And like, I can't believe that it took me that long to figure it out. Like, I really didn't figure it out until I was given the opportunity to train soldiers from Mexico as part of a regionally aligned force mission. And that was like an opportunity to use creativity, because I didn't get those opportunities in my regular job. So I realized that with the right coaching and psychological safety, that I was really good at working with teams to design new concepts. Like I gravitate towards it. I love it. Like the more ambiguous the situation, the more fun it is for me, which is not something, it's kind of the inverse for a lot of people in the military. But the reason why I think in the long run, it kind of turned into success is now it helps me empathize with soldiers who aren't really sure about taking risks to try new things. So that's helped me understand how I can give soldiers the, physical and psychological space and how to give them the opportunities to work on something that they're passionate about, and giving them the right tools so that they can try new things and that they don't end up as, Second Lieutenant Hansen, who was just trying to hide that she hates administration. I really wish that I had tried new things earlier. And I did learn that lesson so spectacularly that, now I hope that,
it's your life purpose. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It helps me. And anybody who comes into Eagle Works, don't do what I did.
Yeah, and it provides instantaneous psychological trust is established because you were on the other side of not having done it. And not that we live with regret, but you made that mistake and you've come back, the hero's journey, right? That people always constantly talk about.
Right.
Now you're coming back after you've gone through those trials and tribulations.
Right.
I absolutely love that. Lauren, we could talk for another hour. I want to be very mindful of your time. I'm extremely grateful for this. Before we go, I know you're a Sixer, so you know what question I'm going to ask. Lauren Hansen-Armendariz, how are you better today than yesterday?
Yeah, I love this question. I think today I'm better at being comfortable, being uncomfortable. When you're working in the innovation space, you're always working in the new. And I mean, newness is inherent in innovation, but especially when we were trying to design and establish EagleWorks, no one had ever done anything like this before. We didn't know exactly how it was going to work. A lot of people thought that we were going to fail, right? Because it was just new, and there's not clear resources for something like this. And understanding how we could build it required talking to a lot of people and strangers. I really, the first 4 months was just seriously talking to strangers, calling people up from different organizations, hey, I heard you do this. What did you learn? How do you do things? And what an incredible experience, right? It kind of forced me to just talk to people, right? And just understand about their experiences and empathize with them and understand kind of the different ways of doing things. And so, it was really uncomfortable at first. And trying new things, no matter how often you do it, it's still going to be uncomfortable, right? But I think what's found it easier, or not easier, but a way I've found to make it more constructive is being mindful of it, recognize it. Okay, I'm really uncomfortable, and being deliberate about taking a learning approach. So kind of the quick example I'll give is, so I've facilitated a lot of design thinking workshops with soldiers and gotten amazing feedback. I absolutely love doing it. And so I volunteered to facilitate a workshop for a team of volunteers related to the military who wanted to explore ways that Web3 concepts could be applied to national security. It wasn't official or anything, but I felt completely out of my league because of the topic and the experience level of the participants. And then on top of that, I'd never done it virtually. So I was really nervous, to the point where I almost didn't want to do it. But at this point, I just put myself out there so many times because of my job as an innovation officer. Like I literally remember thinking to myself, if this makes me so uncomfortable, it's because I'm trying something new. Like, obviously I need to be doing this more. And so, I remember consciously reframing it as a learning opportunity. So when I did facilitate the workshop, I was really transparent with everyone that we would be discovery learning together. And in the end, I got a lot of really great feedback that now I'm integrating into my new facilitation. So, at the end of the day, like if you'd asked me a couple of years ago to volunteer to be this uncomfortable, I don't know that I would have done it. But now, I'm just so much more deliberate and purposeful about trying new things and being uncomfortable. So I think that's one thing that, these last few years have really changed for me. What has made me better is just you have to be you can't grow being comfortable. And so in order to continuously be uncomfortable, you have to be really deliberate about it.
Being mindful enough about the newness in order to innovate to serve others. What an absolute beautiful message that anyone can use. Lauren, thank you so much for your time. Before we go, where can people go to connect with you and learn more about the unbelievable work that you're doing?
Yeah, you can find us just by Googling EagleWorks. And we have our website there, and you can contact us that way.
Awesome.
Or
We
if
will
you're
make
in
sure we
Fort
link that in the
Campbell
show notes.
area, you can come visit us in person as well. Our address is on our website.
Awesome. And we will make sure we put that in the show notes. Lauren, thank you so much for your time, your strategies, your method, your vulnerability, and of course, thanks for having our six.
I don't know what you've been told, Sixers, but the lawyers would like us to remind you that the views, opinions, and comments expressed on the Got Your Six podcast are solely those of the hosts or guests, to include current and previous Department of Defense employees, and should in no way be considered the opinions of or endorsements on behalf of the Department of Defense or any of its components, divisions, contractors, or other current and previous staff members.